The movie kicks off in the Arctic, where a group of American meteorologists are on a mission to drill through the ice to measure how thick the ice sheet is. One of the scientists, Frank, is using the drill when suddenly the drilling causes a crack to form in the ice beneath them. Frank is literally about to get swallowed up by the gap in the ice, but his buddies manage to grab him just in time and pull him back to safety. The catch? Their equipment is on the other side of the crack. Enter our hero, Jack Hall, who runs like he's straight out of the Olympics, jumps across the gap, and manages to get the gear back before the whole ice sheet collapses and they all get buried. Unfortunately, Jack can't hold on for long and falls into the ice. But his friends pull him out just in time and tell him he doesn't need to play the hero every single time. A bit later, we see Jack at a global conference talking to the leaders of every nation about the state of the climate. He's throwing out a bunch of heavy scientific jargon that I didn't quite catch, but the gist of it is clear. The world's in danger. Humans are on the verge of entering a new ice age, but he reassures them, saying this could happen in 100 years, so no need to worry about the old folks in the room. It's the younger generations who should be worried. Now, the US Vice President knows the only way to stop the pollution causing this disaster is to halt oil refining, but, of course, that idea is a non-starter. Halting the oil industry means the world's economy collapses, and people would starve. Jack notices that the world leaders are just focused on oil, power, and politics, while no one is thinking about the actual catastrophe of a frozen planet. After the conference, we learn it was held in India, which just recorded the lowest temperature drop in its history. Jack walks out of the hall and bumps into a scientist named Terry Rapson, one of the most renowned climatologists. Jack is a huge fan of his work, and they agree to meet up soon. After wrapping up his work stuff, Jack gets back to family matters. He calls his wife Lucy and complains about their son Sam because his grades have dropped. Instead of getting straight A's, he only got a B+. And I remember when I barely failed one subject, my dad threw a whole party for me. Like, chill, man. Lucy asks Jack to drive Sam to the airport tomorrow because he's heading to New York for a science competition. Meanwhile, as they're talking, the world is witnessing some insane weather changes. Snow starts falling heavily in Tokyo, Japan, and weather stations are reporting an extreme drop in temperatures in the Arctic. It looks like the ice age isn't 100 years away, it's happening in the next 10 days. Hurricanes start ravaging the planet and a massive snowstorm forms over Earth, which even the astronauts in space notice. The next day, Jack drops Sam off at the airport and we find out that Jack's actually proud of Sam, even though his grades aren't great, because his teacher is jealous of him. Yeah, the teacher's bitter because Sam's smarter. Sam lands in New York and meets his friends, Parks and Laura. They're shocked when they see flocks of birds migrating out of the city. And it's not just the birds. Every animal is freaking out and acting all weird, like they can sense that something huge is about to hit. Temperatures keep dropping and hurricanes continue to hammer the earth. Professor Rapson sees all this happening and calls Jack to wake him up, telling him his theory is coming true. Jack's been working on a weather simulation program and Rapson urges him to focus on it so they can predict future weather patterns. The next day, Jack pitches his program idea to his boss, but the boss isn't buying it. Then, out of nowhere, a series of hurricanes completely destroy Los Angeles. That's when Jack's boss finally calls an emergency meeting to discuss the weather situation. Jack tells them the truth, that things aren't just going to stay bad, they're going to get worse. That's when the boss tells Jack to get to work on his program because if they don't, they'll be doomed. All flights are grounded because of the extreme weather, and cities are slowly being destroyed by the hurricanes and the ice that starts covering them. At this point, Sam is in New York, which is still safe for now, but everyone knows it won't be long before it gets hit. The world is facing a catastrophic disaster. People in the Scandinavian countries are literally freezing to death. Planes are falling out of the sky, bridges are collapsing, and water levels are rising rapidly because the Arctic is melting. Finally, floods hit New York City, and everyone starts running to the old library, which is the only building that's still standing strong enough to survive the storm. Sam's still with his friends, and on their way to the library, their friend Laura stops to help a foreign tourist who doesn't speak English. She saves the woman just in time before the tsunami hits. Sam sprints over to Laura and pulls her to safety, and they both make it into the library just before it's too late. Meanwhile, Jack is in a meeting with the US Vice President, urging him to evacuate all the northern states because they'll be the first to freeze over. But of course, the VP laughs it off, says it's impossible to execute, and walks off to join another meeting. Jack is blindsided when he hears about the hurricane that's hit New York. He watches the news and finds out the city has been destroyed. There's no way in or out. Jack starts freaking out about Sam and can't reach him at all. Even Lucy sees the news at the hospital and rushes over to Jack for some comfort. Back at the library, Sam's thinking hard about how to contact his family and let them know he's okay. But with the mobile networks down, he decides to use the old landline phones in the library. The only catch? They're on the ground floor, which is flooded. Sam and Laura dive into the water, swimming through the flooded library, but in the end, Sam manages to get through to Jack. And Jack is relieved beyond belief to hear that his son is still alive and safe. Jack tells Sam to stay put because anyone who steps outside and faces the ice storm will freeze to death instantly. Jack decides to grab his gear and head to New York himself to rescue Sam. But just before he leaves, his boss shows up and asks him not to go. Apparently, he needs to explain his program idea one more time. Jack tells him he's already explained it multiple times and no one cared. But to his surprise, the person who actually wants to hear the idea this time is the President of the United States himself. Jack attends a meeting with the President and explains that the hurricanes will last for 10 days, and after that, things will settle down. But the Northern Hemisphere will be completely frozen over, and they'll be living in the Ice Age. The only solution they have left is to evacuate from the southern states, like Texas, which hasn't been hit by the storms yet, and head to Mexico. Unfortunately, for everyone still in the northern states, the only thing left is to pray, because anyone who steps outside will freeze to death instantly. The president is convinced by Jack's words and orders the evacuation to Mexico. Now the tables have turned. It's the Americans trying to get into Mexico, while Mexicans are sitting back, eating tacos and laughing at the situation. Now, let's get back to Sam and his friends in the library. They spot a group of people still alive, walking around on the ice. Security tries to convince everyone to leave before the ice melts and they can't get back home. But Sam warns them that if they go outside, they'll freeze instantly. Most people don't believe him, so they decide to leave the library anyway. Sam stays with his friends, along with a few people who actually listen to him. They start gathering books to burn for warmth. No, not Das Kapital by Karl Marx. Meanwhile, Jack and his team of scientists have made it to Philadelphia. They're headed to New York to save Sam, but they can't see anything because of the snowstorm. They end up in a car accident and their vehicle breaks down. So they decide to continue the journey on skis. Lucy's stuck at the hospital where she works, and all the parents are showing up to pick up their kids, except for one kid, Peter, whose family can't be reached. Lucy decides to stay at the hospital with him since she can't leave him alone. Meanwhile, space scientists snap pictures of another ice wave headed straight for Earth and send them to the research and meteorology offices. That's when they realize the temperature drop is about to hit New York City first. Back to Jack and his team. They're walking on the ice sheet that's formed over the buildings. They can't see a thing because of the heavy snowstorm, so they've tied themselves together to stay close. Unfortunately, the gear they're carrying gets caught on a tall building and drags them toward it. Frank, their accident-prone friend, is at the end of the line, and he's the only one still hanging on. The team tries to pull him up, but Frank realizes they're standing on a piece of glass, and it's cracking under their weight. So Frank decides to make the ultimate sacrifice. He cuts the rope, saving his friends, but he falls to his death. Back at the library, Laura's seriously sick. When they check her out, they find out she's got a deep wound in her leg that's gotten infected. Sam's in shock. There are only two options: find insulin or amputate her leg like in the Saw movie. Since leaving the library is basically a death sentence, everyone agrees on the second option, except Sam. He's clearly into Laura and refuses to give up on her, so he decides to risk it and head to the nearest ship to find some medicine. Sam, Parks, and another guy head out toward the ship, but they're met with a pack of wolves that can survive the freezing conditions. The wolves attack them on the ship, but Sam manages to escape through a window and grabs the medicine from the ship's clinic. Before they can leave, the wolves manage to bite the guy with them, and they're all stuck in a room. Sam decides to jump out of the window to distract the wolves so they can make it back to the library. And, of course, his plan works. They make it back safely to the library using a raft to carry their injured friend. On the other side, Jack and his friend Jason continue their journey alone after Frank's death. They notice the storm is getting closer, so they take shelter in a house and start a fire to stay warm. The ice is rapidly approaching the library. Sam and his friends make it inside just in time. They all gather by the fire and start burning whatever they can find, even Das Kapital by Karl Marx. Thankfully, the ice stops just before reaching them. Meanwhile, Lucy is still at the hospital, losing hope of getting an ambulance to transport Peter. But then, out of nowhere, she's surprised by a paramedic who tells her they've been notified about the child. Lucy thanks him, knowing he could have easily ignored them. Jack wakes up and decides to continue his journey to find Sam. Jason tries to convince him that Sam is probably dead after the last storm, but Jack won't hear it and moves forward. Before they reach the library, they start seeing sunlight again, and the ice storm seems to have completely ended. Finally, Jack reaches the library, but he finds it buried under ice. He doesn't want to see his son frozen and dead, but luckily he spots Sam alive with the group. In the end, we see that a lot of people survived the ice storm, and planes start flying to evacuate them to safety. The vice president, now president after the old one passed away, steps outside to apologize to Mother Nature for underestimating her power. And that's the end of our movie.
Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be the first to know about new movie summaries.